The 73rd Annual World Health Assembly, the highest decision-making body of the World Health Organization, wrapped up on Tuesday. In his closing remarks, WHO Director General Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus thanked member states for adopting a resolution calling for an independent and comprehensive evaluation of the international response to the pandemic, including but not limited to the performance of the organization itself. So what's this resolution about? And China pledged $2 billion worth of coronavirus help, while the U.S. threatened to cut off funding and withdraw from the organization. What impact will these moves have on global public health governance, if any? I'm joined from New York via Skype by Max Wolff, founding partner of Multivariate Solutions, a financial consulting company, and also on the phone by Zhao Hai. Let me go to Max here first. Max, what do you think of the specific terminologies that have been used in this resolution that we talked about? For instance, it didn't use terms such as an independent international review as originally proposed by some countries, but rather we're talking about an independent and comprehensive evaluation of the global response, including but not limited to the World Health Organization's performance. How do you look at the differences between these two words and the connotations attached?
So always a pleasure to join you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, I think I have to agree with my colleague from the Yale medical establishment there that the U.S. response to COVID has been several days short and several dollars short in every regard right from the beginning, and we have a president trying to get reelected who no longer even attaches a sort of pretense of being focused on anything else. And we also, unfortunately, here in the U.S. have done the worst national job in terms of response from any developed country. And so now the game of having done the worst job in the developed world by wide margin and having lost over probably 100,000 of our own citizens on the way to maybe many, many more, unfortunately, it's now a race to blame someone else. And probably because the rhetoric was in place for trade and other reasons, blaming someone else. And that someone else, unfortunately, was China. That's been an easy rhetoric for them to slip into. The truth is, the building, the global building, our global prosperity, that building is on fire, and having arguments with the other firefighters which stop them from putting out the fire about who should have done what in the burning building while the building is still on fire are always actively counterproductive and indicative of the failure and failed leadership that we have unfortunately become world famous for in the last several months. So I think that we're watching a president talk about what he wants to talk about to get reelected with a flagrant disregard for the impact and the accuracy of statements.
So before this meeting, there was much hype in the international media about what kind of pressure China will be under, that there will be call for either an independent international investigation on accountability or many countries joining the call for such an investigation. And in the end, we're talking about a very balanced, very objective and professionalism-oriented investigation being proposed. So how much support do you think the U.S.'s call for this kind of politicized investigation has in the international community, Max?
So it's a great question. I think the good news and the bad, I'll start with the bad news so I can end on the good news. The bad news is there are plenty of other governments who've messed this up terribly, lost citizens, lost some legitimacy, lost some popularity, thinking about places like Brazil and Russia particularly, but not exclusively. And so there's lots of people out there who'd love to blame someone else, which will give this more of a consideration than it deserves, this American initiative. On the flip side, I think part of what makes America frightened is much less problematic to the rest of the world. And part of what's frightening the U.S. is that China emerges stronger, better able to help, and just sort of ahead of the U.S. here. And I think the rest of the world would be happy to have the help and have some assistance from a country that's proven itself very good at responding to corona, even unfortunately as the United States has done quite the opposite and proved itself very poor, both at home and abroad, at meeting this task.
All right. Well, Max, thank you very much. I'm going to turn to my colleague Zhao Hai for some of his feedback on some of the things that we've discussed. Zhao Hai, if you're still there, first of all, on some of the lessons that we were hearing Dr. Verman talking about, do you have any feedback? And then on this, this image that China is projecting on the international stage about in the arena of global public health management or governance, What is China's message? Is China to fill a vacuum? Is China to assume leadership? Is China to buy people's heart? How do you look at that?
Well, first of all, I think China is trying to save lives. I think the utmost important thing right now is to save as many lives as possible, and that's what China is focusing on doing. I really like the analogy of firefighters don't fight with each other, and that's what exactly is happening with the current U.S. administration. I think Dr. Tedros' today's word are really good and should echo with other countries. He said, let our shared humanity be the antidote to our shared threat. Mm-hmm. And we're facing a common threat, and this is really not the individual country's problem, it's a global problem. And the only asset we have is each other, and the global community needs to come together and fight this coronavirus together. So I think whenever China is doing is not in terms of competing with the U.S. or filling any void. What China is contributing, either in money or support or PPE, face masks, whatever, the only purpose to save lives.
Okay. Well, does China have the intention to look like a leader now? Very briefly, yes or no, Zhao Hai?
Well, ultimately, you'll need a leader to fight this coronavirus. If the U.S. doesn't want to be one, then China needs to stand up and help other countries.
China needs to do, a better job, but it will take time.
Needed.
Yeah. All right. Many thanks to Zhao Hai from the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. With that, we come to the end of this edition of The Point with me, Li Xin. As always, you can follow me on Facebook and Twitter using the handle The Point with Alex. Thanks for watching. You've got The Point.